Are you or have you ever been worried about your MS in the future? Are you fearful of what may happen? Yeah, me too. When I was first diagnosed, I spent a lot of time worrying about what might happen. Will I end up in a wheelchair? Will I be able to work? Will I become a burden to my family? Will I be in pain? How will I manage the symptoms? Will I miss out on the life that I had envisioned because of this illness or because of disability? I would overthink it a lot. It can be easy for us to go down the rabbit hole of what could possibly happen. Can any of you relate? Let me know in the comments below. Today, I'm going to talk about how I deal with some of these very common fears. I'm also going to share some tips to help us deal with these fears, okay? So grab a cup of coffee or your favorite tea and let's chat about it. Worrying about the future is part of being human. Evolutionarily, we would worry about finding food and shelter and avoiding dangers. It helped with our survival. But in modern times, we've taken worry to a whole nother level. A lot of times we worry about the distant future, the things that are far off. We worry about the worst case scenarios, what could happen, but realistically probably won't happen. We also have information overload. The internet and social media can flood us with information that may be causing us more worry. Having access to the worst possible outcomes, or being on social media where people are talking about how bad they're doing or how difficult their MS is, can be tough. Sometimes this can cause us to come up with some frightening scenarios in our mind. I once heard a quote that said, "My life is full of terrible things that never happened." That is kind of like what worrying about what may happen is like. It steals our joy of today. We can come up with hypothetical scenarios in our minds of what could happen and spend a lot of time living in this future version of our lives that doesn't exist and may never exist. The feelings of uncertainty and the lack of control over what might happen can be overwhelming. It's also completely normal when we're newly diagnosed. If you're newly diagnosed, listen to your Aunt Vickie. It can take a year or two to process this diagnosis, or you may feel all the emotions. And that's completely normal. Be gentle with yourself. When we get stuck in this pattern of overthinking, it can be hard to get out of because there's no action we can take against this hypothetical future. Or is there? More on that later. I wonder when I'm having these thoughts and worries, am I trying to prepare myself for any possible outcome? Like I imagine what it would be like if my disease progresses. How will I respond? How will others respond? Perhaps if I think of all the possible outcomes, I can be better prepared for them if they eventually do happen. Will this help? I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I love to hear from my viewers. And what about the past? Could I have done more in the past to support my current health? What if I haven't done enough? It can be easy to get caught in this cycle of overthinking. And when we do this, we spend more time in the past and more time in the future, and it steals from our present. We can't appreciate what we have right now. When I find myself in this cycle, it can be hard to break out of it. There are two things that I do to try to break this cycle. The first is to write it out. When I get the thoughts out of my head and down on paper or typed out into a document, it helps me to sort through the worries and concerns. The other thing I do is to talk with someone. It can be a trusted friend or my husband or my therapist. Sometimes just saying the words out loud helps. It gets them out of my head. Getting someone else's take on my worries can be helpful too. My therapist is really good at giving me perspective and helping me to see a different perspective. It helps me to move on from these thoughts. A Roman philosopher named Lucius Seneca said, "There are more things that frighten us than injure us. We suffer more in our imagination than in reality." But when I worry about the worst case or the terrible things that may happen, I suffer and am frightened. I suffer in my head, in my imagination, more than in my reality. Does this ever happen to you? Let me know in the comments below. Sometimes we have no control over situations, but sometimes we do. When we ruminate on things that we have no control over, it steals our time from today. Time we could be doing other things, other fun things. What else can we do when these worries or concerns come up about the future? We can look for ways to mitigate the fears by taking steps to prevent the scary things from happening, to be proactive. When we take action, it can help us to feel empowered, when we have things that we can physically do to help us. An example is worrying about not being able to work in the future due to my disease. One of the biggest reasons that people with MS leave the workforce is due to fatigue. There are steps that I can take to reduce fatigue. There are multiple studies showing eating a more plant-based diet can help with MS fatigue. I did a video on it this year, and I'll put it above and below if you'd like to check it out after this one. And sleep is key to keeping my MS symptoms at bay too. I make sure I'm consistently getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night and making sure that I have good sleep hygiene habits. Another example is physical disability. There are steps, literally steps, that I can take to ensure that I stay mobile. I exercise my body every day to help keep it strong, flexible, and agile. Moving our bodies regularly also helps with neuroplasticity. It helps our brains to rewire and find new pathways so that we can keep moving. I've also come to realize over time that needing to use a mobility aid is not the end of the world. Thinking about needing a wheelchair when I was first diagnosed was so frightening. But now, with some perspective and being in this community, I've come to realize it's not as bad as I first thought. We can live amazing and full lives using mobility aids. They're tools that we can use to help us do all the things that we want to do. One of the worst parts of the fear and worry was the time that it stole from me. I've learned to utilize mindfulness and meditation to help me let go of these thoughts and take back my time. I took an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction class shortly after my diagnosis that was incredibly helpful for me, especially when it comes to things that I have no control over. Letting go of the things that I can't control is so freeing. Once I let them go, I move on and I do more important things. We also live in amazing times where modern medicines and therapies can help us to manage our disease. I encourage you to work with your doctors and see which treatments may be best for you. Having fears and worries is normal, but there are things that we can do to help with them. What do you do to help with your fears and worries? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to see a huge list of tips from this community. We can help each other to live well with our MS. Thanks so much for joining me for a cup of coffee today. I appreciate you spending time with me. To see more on how we can have better outcomes with our MS, watch this video next. To help support this channel, please share the videos, like, and subscribe. Thanks. Until next time, be well.